Today's lesson is on integers and absolute value. Our essential question today is, in what situations would you use absolute value instead of an integer? Okay, so we're going to talk about integers and absolute value. So first, let's define what an integer is. Okay, so an integer integers are a set of whole numbers and their opposites. So a lot of times when we think of integers, we really just think of positives and negatives. Because positives and negatives are opposites. Okay, so let's really look at the term opposite and see what that means. So let's define that. So opposite are numbers that are the same distance from zero on the number line. Numbers that are the same distance from zero on the number line. But they're on opposite sides of zero. Okay, so we're going to take our notes now and go ahead and draw a number line. So let's scooch this up a little bit. Now on our number line, we have a straight line with arrows on each end. The arrows indicate that the numbers go on past this line. This is just a sampling of it. In the center of our number line, let's go ahead and put 0. And then let's label some things. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the key to our number line is that we make our tick marks, these little lines, evenly spaced so that we can come back in here and show that these are the same distance between each of them. So on this number line, I went up to 8. You could continue depending on how much room you have. Now on the other side of the 0, you want to make sure that, again, they're still evenly spaced, but from here, we're going to the negative direction, the opposite. So I'm going to go ahead and evenly space my tick marks, and then I'm going to label them. So on going the left-hand direction, this would be -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, and -8. So now these are opposites. So now starting in 0, if I go 1 unit over and 1 unit over on each side, the distance from 0 to -1 is still 1 unit, and the distance from 0 to 1 is 1 unit. So the absolute value is just the distance. So this is 1 unit, this is 1 unit, even though I'm ending up at -1. So that's really what absolute value is. It's the distance. Okay. So on this side, we have all of our positive integers. And then on the other side, we have our negative integers. And then that 0 in the center right here, I'm going to put an arrow, is neither negative or positive. So 0 is neither positive or negative. Okay. So let's look at some vocabulary, some words that we use in word problems to represent positives and negatives. So this is our vocabulary. And we're going to look at positives and we're going to look at negatives. So I'm going to mirror our number line here. So where our 0 is, I'm going to put a line straight down. And over here, we're going to have our positive change. And on the opposite side, we're going to have our negative change. So some words that we use for positive change would be money earned. So if we earn money, that's a positive change. The opposite of that would be to spend something. So the negative is going to be to spend. You spend money. Okay. Another thing that you could write for the positive would be to save. You're saving money. Okay. And the other side, maybe to use something up, would be negative. Another positive would be above. So a lot of times when you see above, like above sea level, when you talk about distance, that would be like mountains. Below sea level would be like in the sea, where the like whales and fish live. For a positive, we have a gain. You gain something. The opposite of that would be to lose something or to have a loss. When something decreases and increases, so a positive would be increase, a negative would be decrease. You could have something that rises or rose. The opposite would be to fall or fell. Another one maybe to decline and incline. So incline would be the positive. Decline would be the negative. Okay. One last one let's add is ascend and descend. Ascend would be like to go up. Descend is to go down. Okay. So if you need to pause the video to get the rest of those written down, you can. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to our second page. So let's go ahead and talk about absolute value and define that. So absolute value, we talked about it about being the distance. So it is the distance from 0 on a number line Something to note, we'll add a little star there, is that absolute value is always positive because distance is always positive. Okay, so again, we talked about number lines. Oops, I forgot the E there. We talked about number lines. So I'm going to draw another number line and we'll look at a few examples. Okay, so on your page, let's go ahead and give ourselves a number line here. Here's 0 in the center. So we're going to have positives and negatives. Let's evenly space our tick marks. If you want to use a ruler or something, you can, or you can just kind of eyeball it. And then let's label them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, -1, -2. So we're starting from 0 and going this way. So -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. Now, for our first example, we're going to have the absolute value of -4. And we want to know what that is equal to. Absolute value of -4. Now, we know if this was a 4 in here, well, actually, let's just start with -4. So we're starting at 0, and we're going to go all the way to -4 over here. We want to know how many units that is. So we can start here and count. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 4 units. So the absolute value, the distance between 0 and -4 is 4 units. So the answer would be 4. Now the opposite of that, let's look at the absolute value of just 4. So that's the distance. So from starting at 0 and going all the way to 4 here, we'd count 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 units. So the absolute value of 4 is also 4. Notice how it just flips it to positive because distance is positive. So we're just counting the number of units from 0 to that number. Let's look at another example. This time, we're going to have the absolute value of 20 minus 20. Now, if you have a problem like this, you're going to want to do the math inside of the absolute value before you take the absolute value. So it's almost like this is parentheses and you do everything inside of parentheses first. So what is 20 minus 20? Well, 20 minus 20 is just 0, and it's still the absolute value. Well, the absolute value of 0, the distance between 0 to 0 is just going to be 0. So my answer is going to be 0 for that one. Okay, let's do one more. What about the absolute value of -9 plus the absolute value of 7? I'm going to change colors so you can see our work here. So now they're not both within that absolute value sign. So we have to find the absolute value of -9, the distance between 0 to -9. Then we're going to add it to the absolute value of 7. So the absolute value of -9 is just going to be a positive 9. The absolute value of 7 is 7. Now we can add those together straight across. So 9 plus 7 gives me 16. So that's my answer. Let's try another one that looks a little bit different. And this will be our last example for today. The absolute value of 9 minus 3 minus the absolute value of 2 plus 3. So what's the first thing we need to do? We need to simplify inside of that absolute value. So we're going to write that as a step. Number 1, simplify inside of the absolute value. Okay, so let's do that. So 9 minus 3 is 6. And it's still in the absolute value signs because it's inside of there, minus absolute value of 2 plus 3, which is 5. Okay. Now, the second step, we're going to find the absolute value. So the absolute value of 6 is just 6. The absolute value of 5 is just 5. It's that distance from 0 to 6 is 6. The distance from 0 to 5 is 5. Then our last step, step 3, is just to add or subtract or just simplify the expression. So 6 minus 5 is just 1. So my final answer is 1.